Hello and welcome to CBC Arts Exhibitionists. I'm your host, Amanda Paris. Today we'll meet an illustrator exploring the dangers of celebrity fame. Shary Boyle makes a print that claps back at a male-dominated scene. We run through 2019's biggest queer stories in arts and pop culture. And we meet an artist determined to showcase the magic of our natural world. It's the first episode of the year and of the decade. I hope you're ready for it. This is CBC Arts Exhibitionists. When was the last time you stopped to admire a piece of moss or stood in awe watching a butterfly? It can be easy to take our everyday world for granted, but artist Whitney Lewis-Smith is determined to remind us of just how magical it all is. She forages for mushrooms and plants and uses taxidermied creatures to construct elaborately staged sets. Whitney's hope is that if audiences feel more tied to the natural world, they may also become more inclined to protect it. Take a look.
I actually didn't start in photography. I studied drawing and painting at Concordia University. When I left, I felt that I was missing the science and all that time that I used to spend in nature. Being stuck in a studio in a city didn't really suit me very well. And I went off to volunteer doing marine research in the Seychelles and working with scientists. And that fulfilled the other half of me. I get to now use science and art and put them together in a way that suits me very well and talks about the subject matter that I love so much.
My name is Whitney Lewis-Smith. I'm a photo-based artist, but the majority of what I do is actually collecting, sourcing, and building sets. It's much more sculptural than just a photograph. I make images on glass plate negatives that I make myself. I create other worlds using plants and animals and insects and try to involve the viewer in this alternate universe that I create.
I am trying to recreate that childlike sense of wonder that I felt being an only child living in nature, exploring on my own and having the woods and plants and animals be the things that surrounded me, and the magic of it. All the little things happening in nature that we so often don't see anymore because we're too busy looking beyond in our own lives. So we are at my country home in Val-des-Bois, Quebec, and I'm gonna take you around and explore some of the plants and maybe animals that I use in my pieces. First, mushrooms of the season. These are false morels. A week ago, this was all snow, and now they're just all the way along the side of the ridge. I put these in my sets and photograph them in my dioramas, but I wouldn't use them for food or pigments. They kind of turn to sludge if you try and dry them. These little guys are great for all sorts of things. Taking apart or laying them down on light-sensitive paper to make blueprints. And then up here, we have some really beautiful moss that I take little bits of every once in a while. Try not to break it. Here. When I started this process, the work was a lot darker. I was using more taxidermy, antique taxidermy, and different things that I found that may have come across as morbid or dealing with mortality and humanity's mortality. And I think for some people that was very difficult subject matter to tackle. After the taxidermy, I moved on to more botanical pieces. They were heavily influenced by Dutch Golden Era paintings. At that time, the Vatican told the people that they were no longer allowed to use religious figures in art, and so floral painting for the first time became a serious art form. And most of these botanical things couldn't exist together in one place at the same time, which is fascinating to me. A painter would have had to travel with an explorer or paint from imagination from stories told by scientists who traveled to other places in the world or brought specimens back on boats for them. So it was such a luxury to own a painting like this or even to be able to paint one. And now it's all possible to create that in real life. And I think it speaks so much to our time and how we really don't understand the value of the world and the things that we have. So it's all about sustainability, about talking about the environment, and also being as educated as I can be on the subject matter that I'm so curious about sharing and learning about. But as my work has evolved and become more bright and looking towards the future, I have people calling me after a year and they go, my God, I've been looking at this picture that I have in my kitchen and I never noticed that butterfly and that interaction with that insect. It makes me feel like I'm doing my job, that people get to be immersed in this other world and continue to find things and see the magic in it and know that there's something to discover all the time. To see it actually printed and framed and finalized and see all the work together, it's a way for me to reflect back on the work and understand it better, seeing it in that scenario. And it's also the moment when it becomes the viewer's work. So once it's up on the wall and framed, it's not mine anymore. People can use that work to go to whatever place they want to go to think about it however they want. I can't take ownership over their thoughts. I mean, some of the plants will be extinct in their lifetime, so they'll own a photo that's literally impossible to create.
Hi, my name is Amanda Arlotta. I'm an illustrator based in Toronto, and I'm your exhibitionist in residence this week. You're going to be seeing my film Fame, part of my illustration series, which explores the dangers of stardom and the impact it has on one's identity. This film brings together the series of illustrations to show how each of their environments are interconnected within this world they inhabit. If you'd like to see more illustrations or videos, check out my website, amandaarlotta.com, or my Instagram at amandaarlotta. Now, here's Fame.
Coming up, we find out why one of Canada's most celebrated artists decided to subversively call out an art world boys club. Shary Boyle is one of Canada's most in-demand artists. Her work has been exhibited all over the world, and she represented Canada in the 2013 Venice Biennale. Shary is one of 8 artists reviving the famous lithography workshop at NSCAD University in Halifax. She's used it as an opportunity to respond to a male-dominated art form and a male-dominated space. Take a look.
I read somewhere, I can't remember who said this, that I thought was so interesting, that artist studios were a place that artists retreat to every day to reassemble themselves. This work, and my work in general, are absolutely projections of my own experience, so they could be called self-portraits. I was thinking of creating an image somehow inspired by the cephalophoric saints. A person who had their head disconnected but was still able to impart some expression of themselves. My practice is based in drawing, and I've always drawn since I was a child. I never had that time where I stopped. It allowed me a place to build a reality and have kind of control of a reality that didn't correlate with actual life. When I started to make sketches for this project, I know that I wanted to make an image of an artist. The character is headless, so she might be related to a cephalophoric saint. So interesting, right? The person that has no head, and but is still alive. The head that she does have is just a 18th century French wig stand made out of porcelain. You know, I thought that would be a real put down. I always thought that with cars, that if you know, you could call somebody an airbag. Whenever everybody talks about an airbag in a car, I'm like, yeah, I've known so many airbags. Maybe me myself. And then I thought, a wig stand. That'd be such a burn to call somebody a wig stand. It seems such a essential undermining, especially of the female kind of authority. Your wig stand. She's creating a portrait bust out of terracotta in her sculpture studio. Maybe she's creating her own head. This is artists in their studio assembling themselves, right? So there's a kind of literal identity building. I was interested in participating in this lithography project because of the nature of working with stone. The idea that stone has a memory, stone retains a line, almost like a history in it, is very poetic and very beautiful to me. When I first started to create the composition for this drawing, I wanted an artist in a kind of classic modernist studio, something that people would identify as kind of a dirty, masterly, unconscious space that an artist would be creating and making a big mess in. And I think when we think about that archetype, it's always very masculine. So right off the top of my head, what came to me was Francis Bacon's studio. He is an artist that's a phenomenal painter and a phenomenal artist, but may not have been the best person, especially when it came to his ideas about women. So I thought that was really important to kind of situate a very female experience from my own life or my own mind in front and in that space to try to really counteract it, and also as a bit of a jerk. Like just he's not around anymore, so I'm going to be sitting in his studio. He wouldn't like that, right? So it's a provocative, but also there's humor involved. You know, if we like the effect of how that head looks and how it really comes forward, I can just do a bit of highlighting on it. You know, there's so much history here at NSCAD that's very well documented about the conceptualists, most of whom were male with a few exceptions. To kind of look at that history through those images and to see their conversation and to see how times have changed. That big cock party of the 60s is like completely uninteresting to me. There's Joyce Whelan's infamous kissing the stone. Whelan's print became a great success and it blew up. People wanted to make reproductions of it. It was on billboards, it was on textiles. She got a lot of really positive reinforcement for that work. And immediately you see Vito Conche moving and be like, I can make a print about this too, and I'll make a better print and a more important print. And it's hard not to read it like that because all of a sudden there's him in a photograph, right? With his super cool kind of Brian Eno hair, and he's applying lipstick, and then he's like making greasy kind of kiss marks all over the stone and making these kind of really gestural, aggressive like comments on his. It's hard not to kind of feel a little bit like that there was some competition and kind of a very quick move to lay that stamp over top of that mark, right? To make sure that that mark didn't have like its own place in history. And I guess in a way, there is a mischievous part of me that wanted to kind of take such a sacred image like the studio of Francis Bacon and lay my kiss mark on top of it.
Coming up, we have 2019's biggest stories in queer art and culture in alphabetical order. Peter Canet is the creator and writer behind the award-winning Queeries, a weekly CBC Arts column that digs into LGBTQ art, culture, and identity through a personal lens. Today, he's here to give us the year's top stories in queer art and pop culture, alphabetically. Take it away, Peter.
Thanks, Amanda. So, I know there's been a lot of celebratory lists about the fact that we are in the midst of completing an entire decade, but what about 2019? Because despite generally being a pretty dark year for this world, LGBTQ excellence shined its way through anyway. One of the most revolutionary depictions of sexuality on any screen in 2019 came from an MTV reality dating show. Seriously, Are You the One was wildly insightful in terms of how it depicts what it's like for queer folks to try and find love. Olivia Wilde's hilarious high school buddy comedy both feminizes and queers the teen raunch genre in a way no film released in multiplexes ever has. One of my favorite additions to the CBC family this year has to be the LGBTQ-themed podcast Chosen Family. If you're not listening to it, you're missing out. There's few things that resonated with me as much this year as one specific scene from the Tales of the City reboot. If you've seen the show, you know what I'm talking about. 11 openly LGBTQ folks were nominated for acting Emmys this year, and 4 of them won, including Pose's Billy Porter, who became the first openly gay black man to win a Best Actor prize. Obviously, all hail Fleabag for a million reasons, but let's not forget that it made gay actor Andrew Scott the world's most lusted after man thanks to his perfectly sexy portrayal of Hot Priest. Poet Gwen Banawe's gorgeous collection of work, Holy Wild, won a Governor General's Literary Award for poetry, making her the first trans woman to ever do so. One of the best movies of the year, Celine Sciamma's Portrait of a Lady on Fire gave us an instantly iconic on-screen romance in 18th century lovers Eloise and Marianne. The hottest thing on Broadway right now is sitting down for a 7-hour play about gay trauma where by the end, you and every other person in the theater will be sobbing. It will only cost you a trip to New York and $300 US, but think of what you'll save on therapy. Jonathan Van Ness continued to prove why he is an international treasure when he came out this year as HIV positive, helping reduce what remains a significant stigma for millions of people. Who had a better 21st year than King Princess? They released acclaimed debut album Cheap Queen and played Lollapalooza, Coachella, Glastonbury, and SNL. His single Old Town Road was undeniably the song of the year, spending a record-breaking 19 weeks on top of the Billboard 100. In the midst of all this, he proudly came out, the first artist to ever do that while having a #1 single. If you don't know what must get rid of toxic in community refers to, please find your way to the SNL sketch Sarah Lee and bow down to the comedic genius of Bowen Yang and Harry Styles. Eggplant emoji, eggplant emoji, eggplant emoji, raindrop emoji, train emoji, ghost emoji. 2019 marked the 50th anniversary of a huge year in the history of LGBTQ rights, 1969, and we celebrated that here at CBC Arts with a project called Superqueeros. I know this is a cheat, but 2019 saw 3 different artists explode onto the scene, and if you don't know their names or their work, I suggest you change that. Orville Peck, Ocean Vuong, and Jeremy O. Harris. Every episode of the second season of Pose was an hour of education, perspective, heart and soul, giving us a powerful window into Black, queer, and trans experiences. Canada finally got to represent on RuPaul's Drag Race this year, as our queen Brooklyn Heights fiercely competed her way to a 2nd place finish. One of the best surprises of 2019 was that this Elton John biopic not only didn't suck, but it was a very gay and very jubilant delight. Ryan O'Connell's series is a very charming look at a gay man with cerebral palsy, discovering himself and his sexuality. Our favorite twin sisters blessed us twice in 2019 by revisiting their roots in both a memoir and an open-hearted album that re-recorded songs they initially wrote as teens. Justin Ling's CBC podcast is so much more than an investigation of the horrifying Bruce MacArthur murders, taking a riveting journey into the history of violence of Toronto's gay village. Everyone should be watching Tanny Saracho's Vita, which only got better in its second season of unapologetically female, Latinx, and queer storytelling. Michael Venus's drag and wearable art extravaganza, Wiggle, turned 25 in Montreal this year, and it remains one of Canada's most vital queer art festivals. Speaking of Montreal, Xavier Dolan marked a decade of being Canada's cinematic golden boy by showing us a stripped-down, softer side in his 8th film in just 10 years, Matthias and Maxime. There wasn't just one Canadian drag performer making waves on TV this year. Our very own Yovska slayed on the reality show Dragula, where he competed to become the world's first drag supermonster. All right, let's end things off by celebrating the actors behind Euphoria's LGBTQ heroines, one of whom blessedly has a name that starts with a Z, Zendaya and Hunter Schafer. All right, that's a wrap. Wishing you all a happy new queer.
Thanks, Peter. His columns are always going viral. Just take a look at his article on Harry Styles' sexual ambiguity, or his celebration of beloved local poet and bartender, Patricia Wilson. If you have an artist that you think should be on CBC Arts Exhibitionists, send me a message on social media. Our handle is @CBC Arts. Tune in next week when we'll be doing another deep dive into the captivating work of Canadian artists. Peace.